Hello world, and welcome to another Mythical Creatures Monday. Your MCM Man Crush Monday has nothing on this. I don't know. So, yeah, I don't know how well I explained it last time, but in case you didn't see that video, anyways, I'm going through some of these exercises that are homework for Turing School. And the concept is that you have all these tests regarding a mythical creature. Last week we did unicorn, this week we're doing vampire, and these tests are given to you and will let you know what code you need to write in order to get them to pass. And the whole idea is that you're getting like more fluent with Ruby syntax and what all these different things mean when you're building out a Ruby file, and how to pass information around according to convention, and so that your program works and does the thing that you want it to do. There are a few things that you should probably know before you jump into all these. I didn't mention it last week, but I did try to leave some helpful links in the description box, which I will do again today. It's really good for you to know some terminal shortcuts, your command line, whatever you're using. Being able to navigate in directories and run tests is super important. And if you are watching these videos and you want to do mythical creatures, you want to code along, but some of that stuff is a little bit foreign, leave a comment. I'm happy to make videos that will help people get started with Ruby. That's the language that I mostly code in, and yeah, whatever I can do to be helpful. I remember that file structures and navigating my computer space was super tricky when I first started out. But it becomes second nature. It really does. So really quickly what I'm going to do, I just opened up my terminal and it's in the default directory. So in order to run this test and see what errors I'm getting, I need to change directory. And I know that I need to go to desktop because of how mine is set up. If you don't know where or what directory you're in, you can always use print working directory, pwd, and if you want to know what is in that directory, you can use list, which is abbreviated to ls in bash. So you've got that. I know that I need to go over here into Turing, so I'm just going to navigate over to the appropriate file, and I need to go into one module, and I need to go into homework. Oops. And I need to go into Ruby exercises, and here I have mythical creatures. Great. So if I didn't have my Atom already open, I could do this and push enter, but I have everything I need. So I'm just going to start coding. Well, first the thing that needs to be done is I need to run my test. So Ruby test vampire test gives me a bunch of errors, as it should. You always want to run your test and see what your errors are before you implement code. So I'm going to today I think what I want to do is work with each of these tests one at a time. So I'm going to comment all these others out. Just to keep kind of my brain organized and go step by step. So it's testing that it has a name. If you watched the episode from last week when we worked with unicorn, we knew that this line here is newing up a vampire object and assigning it to this variable within the test. So then later when we want to assert something about the vampire, we have a particular instance of this object to call our method on. And if that all is confusing, let me know. I'll make some videos about those fundamental things, but this is pretty basic Ruby stuff. If it's way too easy, don't worry. In a couple weeks, we'll be getting to more challenging mythical creatures, and it will become more, I think, intermediate exercises in Ruby. So the thing that we want to do is initialize. Basically, we want this to actually be able to assign attributes to the object that we're initializing. So just really quickly, this is a class, and when you have a class of something, that's what I'm talking about over here when I say an instance of the object. This whole vampire thing is like a blueprint for a house, but when we call a new one and save it in something that's initializing it, that's like the house itself, no longer the blueprint, one of this thing. So we're initializing it and it needs to have a name. We can see that we're passing this in as a parameter or an argument. Those two words I use interchangeably. We're passing in an argument, and that is what sets the name. So in order for that to get over here, we need to put it as an argument in our initialize method. This is a variable, so when we initialize this object, it's going to pass in this only argument as the variable name. And to save that, we want, like I mentioned in last week's video, we want an instance variable of name, and we're just going to assign that to whatever is passed in here through this parameter. So instead of being name, now it is Dracula. That should be all we have to do for this first one. Let's see. What? Oh, if you watched last week, you probably know that I forgot something. We need an adder reader in order to access this instance variable name. And it passes. Fantastic. Let's go on to our next test. That one was pretty straightforward. And as always, I really recommend, if you are going through this and coding along, that's great. Make sure to delete your code afterwards and start over. Try to do as much as you can without outside resources to make sure that this is really getting solidified in your brain, especially if you are a current or student at Turing, or if you're enrolled to go to Turing. You really don't want to have to rely on a video like mine to show you how to solve these problems. But I think that Mythical Creatures is a great place to start, because I'm hoping to show some examples of ways that I would solve these problems, or ways that I did solve these problems when I was in Mod 1. And if you can delete all your code and write it again, that's exactly where you want to be. So we want to check, kind of like we did with Unicorn, that the vampire can be named something other than Dracula. So actually, this probably will pass as it is, because there's nothing different here, right? Dracula is getting passed in the same way that Vladimir is. Doing this exercise really makes me want to watch What We Do in the Shadows. It's one of my favorite movies. Okay. Test it keeps a pet bat by default. All right. So if we think back to last week when we talked about default values, I actually got this wrong, but I think I remember how to do it now. We're going to set a default value in these parameters. So this is going to be pet equals bat. And we still have to have an instance variable in case, to assign it, but also if we pass in something here other than bat, it's going to let us do that, and it's just going to assign it the same way that our name assigns to instance variable name. We are going to need a comma here and pet. So let's just see if that passes. Great, that's all we needed to do. Pretty straightforward. This is confusing to me. It has been since I started learning Ruby, but you just kind of get used to it, and you remember that this is kind of the default, and it's almost like passing in just pet and then letting it be whatever you want. But if you want a default, you assign it here, and that takes care of that. So let's go on to another test. Test it can have other pets. So let's just run this test and see what happens. So it works. We saw this with Unicorn. If you pass in something else, it's just going to override all of this and assign it here. Moving on. All right. So we want it to be thirsty by default. Now, I don't recall if we're actually going to want to set thirsty to true here. I think maybe this is since it's a Boolean, this might be a situation where we can do something like this. I'm going to try it and see if it works. Thirsty, true. And it's possible that this will pass now, but when I come down here and do the next thing, I'll have to change it. Let's just see. Right, so the thing is, it doesn't have this method thirsty. And remember that when we have a method that ends in a question mark, that's going to return a Boolean. It's either going to tell us that something is true or something is false. So I'm going to make that method now. And let's see, what's good to put in here? This is always like a little brain teaser. We just want it to return true if this is true. So and we don't want to assign it. We don't want to change the value. So instead of using a single equal, we're going to use the comparator operator, which is 2 equal sign. This is checking to see if this and this are the same. So if this and this are the same, if thirsty is true, then this whole method will return true when we call it here on our vampire instance. All right, let's just see. Let's see if my thinking is on the right track. All right, that passes. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to work with this next thing we're doing, but let's just find out. So now we need to be able to make the vampire not thirsty anymore. So if you think about what's going on here, vampire.drink. Drink is a verb, right? And when we see verbs, we can generally think that's an action, which means we're going to have a method in order to make our program exhibit a certain behavior. Something like a name. Technically, this is a method. That's why we need this adder reader. But this is more of an attribute. It's not something that is going to make an action on this instance, except like saying, hey, give me the name. This is actually going to change something. So, enough talk. Def drink. And when the vampire drinks, we just want thirsty to equal false. Let's see if that works. Fantastic. It worked. That actually went a lot faster than I thought it would. I hope that everything made sense. Again, if I breezed over some things that seem like a foreign language, well, if you're new to Ruby, it is a foreign language. You're learning a new language. Go check out the unicorn video from last week and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'll be happy to walk through more of this material and kind of go from there. Next week we are doing... What's next week? Dragon. So be sure to tune in for that. It's been nice. Have a good week. Happy coding.